There's something going on. Crowd loving it. It's a ball, fly ball. Home run!
3, 2, 1. The NHL Labor Lockout. Well, it hasn't happened yet, I guess, but it looks like it's going to happen. NHL PA had a conference call today. They brought in a lot of members into their New York office and are looking to maybe do a counter proposal to the NHL's latest offer. Now, they haven't talked in about a week. Bettman is looking for his, what, 4th lockout as a commissioner?
I think so. I think this is 4. 3 at least.
As a fan, who do you side with?
I think I side with the players a little more, but I'm not pleased with either side. I side with the players a little more. I mean, they were locked out for an entire season last time. They had to cave, and the owners basically got what they wanted. And in the last few years since the last one, have realized they wanted more, or wanted to have the players have less. So, to me, this is the owners saying that they didn't get enough last time, and they want more. And I think the way they've been signing players, they're crying foul, and yet they're signing players to all these contracts, big contracts, long-term contracts. I just don't see how that works. That's frustrating to me.
And do you see a season where we get a deal, or do we see a season that's going to be wiped out?
I thought originally, like all summer long, I've been sort of the mind that we're going to get a season, but it's going to be about a month delayed. We're going to see some hockey in November. But with Bill Daly coming out and saying his last few comments the last few days about Donald Fear doesn't know anything, and that the owners are really the ones who have been trying to work this out, I'm beginning to wonder if we're going to see hockey by December or not. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not in the meetings, but I'd love to see it, but I don't know if we will now.
I think if I'm a player, based upon what they're saying, I am definitely more on their side. I think the NHL owners got what they wanted last time. Now, maybe it didn't work out for them in the end, but the owners are the ones that are signing these long contracts. The players are willing to take a pay cut. However, they said they'll take the pay cut in terms of a more revenue shared league like the NFL does with their teams. So if they were to take a pay cut, a team, for instance, like the Maple Leafs, don't benefit from it, where a team maybe like Columbus will benefit from it. The idea is that if Crosby were to take a pay cut from his $8.7 million contract and say he only makes $7 million, that 1.7 isn't a savings so that the Toronto Maple Leafs can make $1.7 million more. That 1.7 gets shared amongst the 30 teams, and everybody gets a piece of that pie. So therefore, everyone does better. Now, what that logically means is the teams like Detroit, Toronto, Vancouver, etc., the teams that do well, will have to revenue share more with the lesser markets. But I think in a strong league, that's what you're looking for.
Well, I agree, and I think revenue sharing is the way to go. I think it's the only way to keep teams where they're at, and that seems to be what the NHL wants to do, is keep struggling franchises where they're at and help them out and subsidize them in any way, shape, or form to keep them in the current market, which whole different story, but I agree with you. I think revenue sharing has to happen. I think it has to be more revenue sharing.
But that seems to be the stumbling block for the NHL. The owners don't seem to want to have a larger chunk go to struggling franchises. The bigger markets want to keep onto their revenue.
Well, exactly. I mean, the big markets that make the money, they want all the money they can get, and the smaller markets are wanting more money as well. I mean, but part of the problem too with some of these smaller markets, or less, I guess, financially stable markets, because they may not be that small compared to some of the Canadian markets that are smaller markets but making more money, is they just don't seem to want to put anything forward. I mean, they're signing some stupid contracts, some of these teams, and in that case, when it comes down to the contract, for the trouble they're in at all, it's their own fault. I don't blame the players, is what I was getting at. I mean, I blame the ownerships for that. Because
basically he's wanting to keep these markets together, alive, the smaller or the more struggling markets, but doesn't want to disrupt the minds or the revenue of the larger markets. He kind of wants his cake and to eat it too. He wants it all, and he wants the players to be able, the ones to eat that cost. Where I think the players have a very smart tactical move, saying, "Fine, we'll take a pay cut, but you need to revenue share better, and you need to make a bigger TV contract in Canada instead of taking just CBC. You need to look at CTV, Global, whoever's willing to give you the most money to revenue share better with everybody in the league to have a better sustained league financially for the smaller markets to the bigger markets."
Bettman's never said it out publicly, obviously, but his idea that people are talking about his legacy is these southern teams, these teams that are not doing well, and yet when it comes down to it, if this lockout happens and is a long lockout, his legacy will be a lot of lockouts in his tenure, which is brutal. I mean, he is now on the radio today coming in. I was listening to some guys talking about whether or not he is the worst commissioner in sports in the modern era because of the amount of lockouts. He needs the NHL as a league. The owners need to swallow whatever it is that's holding them back. Get some of these failing teams out, and then they can revenue share some smaller markets, some non-traditional markets. Today, Seattle City Council voted or approved that they're going to allow an arena to be built in Seattle that will hold an NBA and an NHL team. I mean, why not start bringing some of these southern teams or failing markets up to a smaller market in Seattle, but a smarter market to be in, and revenue share the crap out of it?
And that's not to say that teams don't deserve a chance and that there aren't fans in those markets. Like Phoenix has fans. They may not have an abundant amount of fans, but they have hardcore fans. It's not a diss at those fans, the Dallas, whoever is a small market in Florida. If they can't sustain a team there, that's okay. Those fans hopefully will move on to a new team if those franchises move, but you can't sustain teams if you're at 20% capacity night after night, when other teams like the Leafs and the Red Wings are selling out 20,000 seat arenas, and they're selling the beer, they're selling the concessions, they're selling the parking, where, you know, a team like Columbus or well, Atlanta's now gone, but those teams weren't selling out their building, therefore they weren't getting the revenue the other teams were getting.
Absolutely. I mean, to me, and I'm not an economist, I'm not an owner, I'm not a dollar and cents guy at all, but logically, what the NHL is pitching with some of these franchises does not make sense, does not compute to me. Whereas the other people out there who are, the other experts who are for relocation or even expansion, those scenarios seem to be more logical to me. Why not put a second team in Southern Ontario? I mean, outside of all the Leafs and Sabres and Red Wings being able to block it, that's a whole different story. But just the idea of trying to put another team in Southern Ontario, another team in Quebec City. Team Kansas City has a stadium sitting there waiting. Seattle now will have a stadium sitting and waiting.
Well, that's not to say that the teams like Quebec City are now looking at building a stadium, and Saskatchewan has looked at building a stadium, and even Markham, which is very close to here, is looking at building a stadium. Canada's starting to say, hey, our dollar is at par now, we want some teams. Can you logically expand into these markets? Well, yes, you could. You're going to make a lot of money, but if you're not revenue sharing, these teams are just going to start getting more and more of the players, and therefore less and less of the players are going to play down in the lower markets. Or if they do, they're just going to have to overspend it to keep them.
Well, and we're seeing it now where there are some players who don't want to play in a media spotlight, and they want to play in a warm climate. But generally, those are the ones you don't want on your team all the time.
Right.
They're the ones you don't see on Team Canada. They're the ones you don't see winning a lot of championships. They're the ones who like to sit in Florida and Arizona and play golf all year long, and they don't like the media spotlight. They don't like the pressure. So I think you're always going to have that. I think you have that in every league. No matter what it is.
I mean, everyone's individual and everyone has their own style. I think for a better league, you look at a system like the NFL, for instance, in terms of revenue sharing, where every team has a chance to win. Now, you do have big market teams, but they don't always do the best.
And while the NFL, the big market, the second biggest market is LA, and there's no team there right now.
Right. So, but the league thrives.
Absolutely.
So,
every team in that league makes money.
So, anyways, there hopefully is going to be a counter proposal today. We'll see. We'll be back at this topic, I'm sure, many, many times over and over again. So, stay tuned for more.